I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Thursday, August 17th, 2023. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. I'm enjoying this respite in the weather. It's cool out here in Minneapolis and has been hot, has been rainy, and they're promising super heat in the next few days. So today's a nice break. Apologies for the wind. If you hear the wind, we'll try to work that out. But listen, so glad that you're here. And wherever you're joining us from, we appreciate you. We thank you. We remind you that you could be connecting with us from two of our YouTube platforms: YouTube Insight News MN, YouTube Black Press USA, the website, the platform of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. We're also streaming on three Facebook platforms: Al McFarlane's personal Facebook channel, also the Insight News Facebook channel, and Black Press USA Facebook. We are coming out to you on LinkedIn and Twitter. Whenever you're connecting, we value the relationship. Thank you. Please like and support. In fact, go over to the to the Insight News channel, to YouTube Insight News, and there hit the subscribe button, like and share. We want to build our subscription base by having all of us go there and become a subscriber. We're at about 500. We want 1,000. Do what you can do to help us grow today. Well, today we've got a great program. Before I get into that, I want to remind you that we're working with our friends over at the Minnesota Department of Health. We're partnering with them to remind our community that risk still exists for COVID. And even though the end of the pandemic has been declared, we know that there is an increase both locally and nationally. So let's continue to follow the COVID-19 protocols. What do you mean? Wash your hands, stay aware, prioritize prevention. Also, just keep in mind that together we can create awareness, we can encourage testing, we can help everyone to stay safe and stay healthy. So with that, simply enjoy the show. Remember, get well, be well, stay healthy. We continue. Well, I've got a great program today, and it's an excellent program because I'm going to be talking to not only my colleague, Brother W.D. Foster Graham, who is the books editor for Insight News, but through him, we're connecting with two other great Minneapolis authors, Kelvin Johnson and Darnell Johnson. Kelvin Johnson is the author of Don't Fear the Sharks. We'll find out about that. J. Darnell Johnson is author of Roots 4-0 and Old Jim Crow's Jubilee Day Caper. We'll find out about those as well. Some of the things we're going to talk about, like the challenge of writing books and what the reward is. And I want to ask these writers, these authors, how and what they draw from their own lives or the world around them. So it's going to be a good conversation. First, let me bring in WD. Brother WD, how you doing?
Greetings, Al. Great to be here one more time.
Well, it's always great to be with you, and thank you so much for being the guiding light in our effort to engage book writers and book reading. I mean, to me, you are like a missionary out trying to convert the world to understanding how important book writing and book reading is to our community. And so I thank you for that, man, because I think you're doing a phenomenal job. Plus, as an author, you're in the trenches yourself.
Thank you, Al. It's my pleasure.
Well, why don't we have you introduce our two guests today? Let's start with Brother Kelvin Johnson, and then we'll come back in with, by the way, this is Johnson Day, Kelvin Johnson. We've also got our other colleague here, Brother James Johnson, and you are a Johnson as well. So it's the Johnson trifecta today.
That is correct. Yes, my mother's maiden name is Johnson, so yep, I'm part of the group.
There we go. Well, introduce Brother Kelvin. Let's start talking with him.
Okay. Well, as you know, we've recently had what's called a Black Business Month, so it's definitely apropos to introduce our first guest author, Kelvin Johnson. Now, Kelvin is the co-founder of Brevity. It's a Twin Cities-based company that specializes in AI software. He is backed by 5 institutional investors. He has been featured in the Minneapolis Business Journal and also on the Star Tribune. He has a master's degree in accountancy and professional consultancy and a Bachelor of Arts in finance and accounting. So definitely is with my great pleasure to introduce Kelvin Johnson.
Thank you
Welcome.
both, Al, WD. Thank you for the write-up. I'm excited to be with you today.
We'll talk about your book first of all.
Well, Don't Fear the Sharks. It's always been on my bucket list to write a book. Ironically, when I was little, I would always read the Cliff Notes when I was in school, but eventually, grew up and found the beauty of reading books, and then eventually became on my bucket list to write a book. So just a little bit of background. Brevity is a company. It's AI-powered software helping professionals craft and deliver persuasive pitches and presentations. I happened to be, I had Spotify Shuffle on as I was showering, and it's always been on my bucket list to write a book. And the song, famous classic rock song, came on called Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. And boom, voila, the book title came, Don't Fear the Sharks, Principles of Pitch Investors. And then that's when I started scribing and, came up with the book. I think it's really good from a thought leadership perspective that really coincides with what the value we're bringing from the software, but also bringing some other insights from myself and other more successful entrepreneurs, really compact into these 6 principles with concrete examples of how to best pitch, how to best grow your business, but more importantly, how to deal with rejection, really getting into principle 4.
WD, go ahead.
Well, when I was reading your book, when it said "Don't Fear the Sharks," the first thing I thought of was Shark Tank, and that whole thing about about rejection, that sort of thing. So, that being said, I also noticed that you had the 6 principles that, in terms of successful pitching to investors. I want to know more about your trademark, Soul. Tell us about that.
Yes. So Soul, the 4 main books that inspired Brevity that really added an impact was the 3-minute rule, this book right here. This is probably the most significant influence. And then you have Why They Buy by Cherry Tree, Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath, and Story Brand. And there was a formula in 3-minute rule called WAC. What is it? How does it work? Are you sure? Can you do it? And Soul was my variation of WAC that Brant came up with, and it really was around state the target audience and problem, outline how and why your solution works, uncover the proof and potential, and then the L stands for list capabilities and needs. And what it does a really good job of is walking people through the high-level concept, getting the relevant context and the actualization of, what makes this idea stick. So it's really just the right story structure and what people need to understand the problem first before you just dive into the solution. And then once you dive into the solution, people typically want to know, what's your proof? What's that verification? What's that evidence? And then when you're really pitching yourself in a startup pitch, they need to know about your capabilities, but they also need to know, what do you need to get to that next major milestone? So that's a little acronym we came up with. And Soul, and then the other part of Soul is the emotional aspect. You want to make sure you're pitching with some soul. So there's a little bit of emotion involved. So it kind of has 2 purposes: story structure, and then the emotional elements that you need to make sure you can persuade and influence your target audience.
As WD thought about Shark Tank, I thought about something older, and I guess that's our generational difference. I'm a little older than you, WD. I thought about Harvey McKay and Swim with the Sharks. Are you familiar with that book, that literature out of Minneapolis from way back when, Kelvin?
I'm not.
Okay, so he was famous. He's a famous envelope maker, McKay envelopes downtown in the warehouse district. Might not be anymore, but he made more money creating a series of books called Swim with the Sharks, How to Swim with the Sharks, and the subtitle and live, you know. And so that's what came to my mind right away, that you use the shark concept in your project. But I'm fascinated about you and AI. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to take us all to school, because, you know, we hear it and we read it, but it makes a difference when I hear it from the mind and the mouth of a Black man. I believe that your personal story is probably like my personal story, same neighborhood, same community, same church or a variation on it, you know, same experience of challenges, but also the same desire and vision and hope for the future. So with that being our bond, you know, explain to me and to the millions of me that might be seeing this sooner or later, and what AI is and what it means to us.
Yeah, artificial intelligence is basically the way we leverage AI in our company. Is really, AI is not going to replace humans, but what it does do a good job of, especially in the context of brevity and what we've created, is we have a large language model, and AI can help you, you know, really craft content just based off of high level ideas, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the key ways that we're able to leverage our AI is we sell brevity to, you know, enterprise sales teams, and we've created an AI powered role playing software. So role playing is a traditional training methodology that's used to help get sales reps more comfortable with their talk tracks, essentially. So the way we use it, and in order to have a good role play, you have to have a good manual or a good playbook for your team. So we're able to use companies' URLs or their existing content, upload that into our system, and then the AI can make that content more clear, concise, and compelling. So even if it's just, you know, you put something on paper that, you know, 60% sounds right in the realm of what you're trying to communicate, our artificial intelligence can help you make your content more clear, concise, and compelling, which ties back to the working definition of brevity. And to be honest with you, I still think it's magic myself. I have the best CTO in the state of Minnesota that can like get into the weeds. I'm not the tech guy. I'm a sales guy at the company. But yeah, it just makes your content more clear, concise, and compelling.
And so you've developed an application now that helps any business clarify its mission and achieve its goals. What does that mean for our community in particular? I know you're addressing the entire market. You know, the market is big, it's global, but my interest is in how do we as a community engage assets and resources and strategies like the ones you're bringing to market. What could it mean for our people? Yeah,
I mean, I would say the top applications, right? You have my favorite, we've created what's called Brevity Role Play Interview, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody has to interview for a job. It's my favorite product. And the way it works is 3 simple steps. You're able to upload your resume into our software, upload your LinkedIn URL, upload the specific job description, and then our artificial intelligence automatically creates all the questions and answers you need to knock that specific job interview out of the park. And then on top of it, not only are you getting the content, but we allow you to practice the delivery with almost a real person in our software. So it's going to be a back and forth conversation. You know, walk me through your resume. You're going to hear that. Walk me through your resume. You're going to answer the question, and they may ask a follow-up question. So we've been able to get people jobs at Johnson and Johnson, Stryker, Saturnia by leveraging this piece of software.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Show the cover of your book again. Put the cover of your book up again. I wanted to, over a little bit, and bring it in closer. As a matter of fact, I wanted to read and over to it. There we go. The principles. Name the principles that you make reference to.
All right. So let's see. May have to look in no particular. So number 1 is validate your key assumptions. You know, so many times people go into business like I have a great idea, but they don't validate: is there a need? Is there actual pain? How many people have that pain? Or are people willing to pay for that pain? So that's really principle 1. Principle 2 is it's called anticipate the post pitch. Some people can have a knockout pitch, but they fail to answer the clarifying questions. You see it on Shark Tank all the time where people don't know the numbers, all of that stuff. So really anticipating the post pitch. And that's where our product, Brevity Role Play, does a really good job, where you can practice your pitch, but more importantly, what are those questions that are going to be asked from investors or prospective buyers after? So that's another way. The third principle, I should know this off the top of my head, but the third principle is know your audience, right? Really having a deep understanding into those personality traits, different attributes of that audience. Principle 4, and my favorite portion of the book, is really about incorporating your motivation. So many books on pitching and presenting just talk about the X's and O's, story structure, messaging, customer acquisition costs, all this other stuff that you can learn. But what's not talked about is how do you respond when you get punched in the gut? And what is your self-care program? What is your stress management program? Where's your support from your friends and family? Are you eliminating friends that are depletion sources versus nourishment? So there's a lot more that goes into pitching beyond actually just having a great pitch. Not everybody, we're in bad, macroeconomic conditions right now. Not everybody's going to buy, right? So what are you doing to pick yourself back up when you get punched? That's my favorite chapter. Principle 5 is really pitching is a numbers game, right? And then principle 6 is, as we talked about earlier, making sure your pitch has soul.
Excellent. I would like to ask you too, because when I was reading your book and sharing your story, could you expand on the role relationships play in these principles?
My favorite, there's different stages. So at year to date, Brevity's raised close to $2 million in capital. We have the 5 institutional investors, probably about 19 angel investors, right? The easiest way to raise capital is to have traction. You have to have good success metrics, revenue, getting close to break even. It's a lot easier to raise capital when you have the metrics. But when you're first starting off and you're a venture, you're not going to have any traction, right? And I'm blessed. My parents made sacrifices. I was in private school. My siblings, we were in private school all our lives, and that gave me, access to certain people to raise capital from. But the number one question, and this is why it pays to be a kind, humble, still confident. That humility and confidence is key. But the number one question in that book is, whose heart, mind, and wallet have I had a positive impact on? With the caveat that also happens to have a good amount of money. And what I did was I did a timeline from kindergarten all the way up to now. And I just started scribing whose heart, mind, and wallet I've had a positive impact on. And when we look at the friends and family round we did for the company, which was roughly around 232 grand, the number one source of capital came from this executive business coaching group that I've been in 4 years called Allied Executives. The number 2 source of capital came from professors and peers from Villanova University. And then number 3, which was really ironic, was the parents of the kids I coached during my grad school program. Hey. I didn't go into coaching football, basketball, and track expecting to get a check. I was like 23 years old, 22, 23 years old. I'm 34 now. I didn't go in with that like, oh, I'm eventually going to get 25 grand from this parent, but I had a positive impact on their children's lives. I kept in touch with a lot of these people. I kept in touch with the 3 Villanova professors that, put in money to the company, just giving them updates. And then I eventually, started Brevity, and some of them were like, oh, let me know if you need 25 grand, because I kept in contact with them over the years.
That's a wonderful story, man. So where did you go to school? Where did you go to school?
I went to Villanova for grad and undergrad.
No, I'm at kindergarten.
Oh, went to Waldron Mercy Academy, and I'm a Philly boy, so I grew up in West Philly. It's on in the main line, Lower Marion. So I went to Waldron, Penn Charter for high school, then Villanova for grad and undergrad.
Tell me about your parents. Whose shoulders do you stand on? I'm sure they're proud of you, and you've obviously have the great reverence they've already shown how much they mean to you. But talk about them, give them credit, and even your friends.
Absolutely.
This is about relationships again. Go ahead.
They're on the first page of that book, right? I wouldn't be here in this position if it wasn't for them. They're both sales professionals. Mom's been a pharmaceutical executive the last 20 years of her career, multiple presidents clubs. And my dad, taking after his footsteps, he had his own technology company as well in the 90s. So I stayed away from sales for quite some time because my first job, I was a CPA at Ernst & Young. And then, both of them were like, what the hell are you doing being a CPA? You can't stop running your mouth. And they were right. So eventually I just, chose different professions over the years where I eventually, now I'm a founder. I'm in founder sales mode, at Brevity. Now I've taken after their footsteps. One, my dad from, running his own technology company, and then also my mom, and her charisma. And I joke around, I would say on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of extrovert being 10, introvert being 0, I say like I'm a 7.5. My parents are like both 12 out of 10s.
Well,
Awesome. I was thinking about, because I see you were talking about, how you handle rejection. And those of us who have been authors know what it's like to get all those rejection letters that come in. Of course, back in the day, you got letters. You probably didn't get emails. I'm thinking since Brevity and your book go hand in hand, what were the significant challenges you faced, and what did you learn from them that strengthened you to go forward?
Yeah, significant challenges. So let's go to that. Let's go to the that quote I said a little bit earlier about whose heart, mind, and wallet I've had a positive impact on. Right? We closed, I think, 50. I pitched 132 investors that fit that whose heart, mind, and wallet I had a positive impact on, and only 15 of those actually wrote a check. So if you just do some rough math, that's not a very high close ratio. So that was a lot of pain and persistence needed. But the real lesson learned there that I've really evolved into is, what are you doing to protect that game between the ears? So I've really just been able to just double down on my self-care practices overall. Right. So from making sure, I say, taking your meds, meditation, exercise, diet, sleep. And that's why I poured so much into Principle 4, making sure you got friends that are nourishing. And if they're not, it's time to either prune or cut certain people off. The biggest lesson learned for me is, probably doing that a little bit sooner to make sure I'm showing up my relaxed best self. And the other thing I'll double down on is I'm big on this concept of being a professional emotions processor. Because of the volume and amount of rejection that you can get, I use a journaling technique called RAIN, which helps you really process through. And I may do that 2 to 3 times a day, depending on, the type, who am I getting the rejection from, to really process that. So, I'm as clear-minded as possible when I'm pitching, pitching people. And RAIN, what that stands for is it is a journaling technique. The R stands for recognition. The A stands for acceptance. The I stands for investigate why. And the N stands for nourishment and nurturing. So, for example, with the recognition, you could be like, I recognize that I feel exhausted, mentally fatigued, and upset and hurt. And a lot of time, we talk about the A of it is acceptance. I accept that I feel mentally fatigued, exhausted, blah, blah, blah. And then the I is really a free flow, just investigating why. And you just write it out. Get all of those thoughts and concerns out. And the N is really about that affirmation. How are you building yourself back up? Because you are not those emotions, right? So that's a journaling technique that I honestly do 7 days a week. And depending on the season, I may be doing that like 3 times a day.
Al, on mute.
From mute.
I'm in a windstorm here at my house in North Minneapolis. So listen, I'm so impressed and I'm so thankful for you, for what you've written and for what you're sharing today. And 2 questions. One is, where can people buy the book? How's the book doing? And what's your vision? What's your dream? What do you want to do? And third question, what's next?
All right. So the first question was the first question was. So can you repeat that again? I'm so sorry.
Where to get the book? Where do we
Where to
buy
get the
it?
book? So
Let's sell
so
some
Barnes
books
and
today.
Yeah. So Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, strivepublishing.com. That was a shout out to Latoya.
Mary,
That was our publisher. And then it's also in a bookstore downtown in the IDS Center at the Strive. Strive Publishing has a bookstore.
Yep.
Super cool to check that out. 2 months ago, I think. Yeah, 2 months ago I was there. Vision for the book. I would any early stage entrepreneur. I think this is an amazing book that chronicles not just our journeys, but more importantly, people that are way further along than myself. It's entrepreneurs that I aspire to get to their stage and their journeys. So we really interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs that secured the bag from the most notable investors in the world. When you think about Mark Cuban, Lori Grenier, so I would love this in every college entrepreneur. I have dreams to eventually become a professor at Villanova or University of Minnesota at some point. So this book, as we think of, I want this to be in the curriculum for high school entrepreneurship classes and different academic institutions that have innovation and entrepreneurial programs. And then
doing any more books?
What's that?
You have more books that you're working on?
I have a few in the hopper, a few ideas that are percolating. I think the theme of just really chronicling our journeys, chronicling Brevity's journey, at the different stages of growth, being able to interview different people where I want to get. I'm always a big fan of getting mentorship from people that are one or two stages where you want to get. So there may be another book that's maybe coming out in the next 2 years.
Awesome. WD, any more questions or comments?
Well, we definitely, when it comes to the community and building our businesses, you provided an excellent roadmap to do that, because all businesses at some point need to gain capital. So I acknowledge you for the work you're doing. And this is because I'm definitely an advocate of seeing the works of Black authors in our public library system here. I definitely would love to see your book in the Minnesota public library systems.
Let me know how. I'm here.
Oh, I do have a hookup with the Library Association, so I can include your book on the anti-racism resources.
Love it.
And I'd like to have you come back to talk about business creation and business development. One of the things we want to do with this program is at least every week feature interviews with entrepreneurs and people that are in the wealth building business. Building wealth is something that is critical for our community. Number one, understanding what it means and demystifying money and despookifying our tales about money as a destabilizing and a source of wickedness. I think we need to do some house cleaning and understand what it means to be sustainable, and what it means to grow community, and what it means to be accountable, and finally what it means to take on the responsibility of stewardship of our families, our community, our country, and the world. And that means understanding and creating systems, processes that reflect our dignity, our aspirations, and our potential, and that benefit all of humanity. That's what I think. And I think you're on that track, just you coming from that place.
Exactly.
Count me in. I mean, I did this I call it the 3 Ps, that intersection of passion, purpose, and profit, right? So yeah, it's the passion side, is the impact we're providing, but I did this to, create some family generational wealth. So that's I would love to be on.
We're going to stay connected. Okay. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you, WD.
Oh, my pleasure.
And let's introduce our second guest. We're going to just say hi to him first and watch this trailer about his book and then get into the conversation. But go ahead, WD. Talk about our next guest.
Well, our next guest author is James Darnell Johnson. Now, he is the author of Roots for Zero and Old Jim Crow's Jubilee Day Caper. And he is the recipient of the Planting People Growing Justice Institute Award. And when he's not writing, he is helping dads to connect and reconnect with their children at Goodwill Easter Seals. And he is an amazing storyteller in the fashion of a modern day griot, because touching back on the fact that our African roots, our African traditions, are oral traditions. So again, my great pleasure to introduce James Darnell Johnson.
Brother Johnson, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Al. Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we go back a long ways. So, this is really great to see you here in this format. But I want to make sure that before we're done, I hear a story. I love the art that that people have in our community. So think about what story you can tell that illustrates, the power of story in our lives. But let's do this. Is your video ready? Let's do the video first of all. Talks about your work, and then we'll come back and get into it. Amazing, beautiful, man. Simply wonderful. Talk about the book.
Yeah. So Roots for Zero. I got that ideal from. Have you guys ever heard of the movie and book called The Wizard of Oz?
Mm-hmm.
I connected that right away.
Connected that right away. Yes, you did, WD. And so what I was thinking is in The Wizard of Oz, the book and movie, the original, there was a white girl named Dorothy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a beautiful white woman named Glinda the Good Witch. And then there was the evil witch, which was her sister, the Wicked Witch from the North. And then they also had 3 different characters that Dorothy ran into on her way to find the Wizard of Oz. And it was the Scarecrow, who had no brain. It was the Tin Man, who had no heart. And it was the Lion, who had no courage. And then, of course, there was the wizard himself. And I said, well, what if I created a children's story based on that theme that would be reflective of African American culture? And so I said, okay, let's put in Dorothy's spot a runaway African slave girl named Zero, who's 14 years old. Let's get her to run away from her plantation under her master's authority. And let's get her to encounter a beautiful butterfly lady that I call Queen Azina, who's also very passionate and warm, and she also has magical powers. And I liken her to Glinda the Good Witch. And then she goes on her journey, but first Queen Azina tells her, look here, Zero, in order for you to find your roots, you have to go to find a town griot in the north. But you can't do that by yourself. You're going to have to do it with the help of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. And so what she does on her way, just like Dorothy on her way ran into 3 people who had didn't have certain attributes. She first runs into Blank. Okay, so you got Zero and you got a runaway slave named Blank, and Blank had no history. And then they both go further and they run into Period, and Period had no culture. And then they run further along, and then they run into Question. That's Question's name, and her name, her lost essence was her identity. And so you had no roots, no culture, no history, no identity. And then they had to find, with the help of Harriet Tubman, find their way to get to the north to become free, and then find the town griot to find their essence.
That's beautiful. So what's been the response so far? What's been the reaction to your book?
Reaction has been really powerful, especially at the last the last event that we were at, and WD was there too. Black Children's Book Fair. All the parents were raving about Roots for Zero because they said because they reminded them of the Wizard of Oz, and all the kids, children really loved the ideal of it, and how I was able to intertwine the culture, history, and identity in there, and how important it is for our children to be able to try to go after that, and what it's like to not have that.
WD, what you think?
When I read it, I said, yes, I wish that these books were around when I was a kid. Now, get real here. When we were kids, we had Further Adventures of Dick and Jane. We did not have books that reflected us, or any characters who looked like us. And so I would ask this, Jay. So what are some more things we can do as a community to further, getting these children's books out there, especially given like that attempt in Florida, where they want to say rewrite history and that sort of thing. What can we do?
Yeah, so one of the first things that we can do is to go to book fairs like the one we were just at last week, and to identify and find those bookstores, local or national, because you can get them online, and collect those books so that within your children's reading level, and then they'll be able to read to their children. And also, you can't ask your children to read unless they see you reading. They need to see you. They need to see a bookshelf in your house. They need to see pictures of people reading books. They need to be able to talk about book fairs and libraries. And libraries are kind of going out of style now, unfortunately, where some kids don't even know about libraries. But libraries are very, very public place, obviously, for people to be able to talk about the books, read their books, and talk about their experiences that reflect their own history and culture.
Yes, I agree with you on that. And now, just kind of piggybacking on that, what, in your opinion, would be a way to get parents engaged in this process? Because you said sometimes if parents aren't doing it, the kids aren't going to do it.
Yeah, well, the community forums that happen around the Twin Cities and around the country is really the way for people to come in and be a part of the community gathering.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have a Kwanzaa celebration, you might have Black History celebration, Juneteenth celebration, for example. All of those things, our writers need to show up and be in those spaces and reading and being given opportunity, be given an avenue to read their books and talk about the experiences that they had in terms of when they wrote the book and what they were trying to convey, because it's important for the parents to understand it, and once the parents like it, they're more apt to buy the book.
Amen to that. So that being said, now could tell us more about what your creative process has been, and Roots for Zero and Old Jim Crow's Jubilee Day Caper. Our readers would be very interested.
WD, what happens with my process is it happens up here first. And it comes in ideals and situations and scenarios and names and phrases and the environment and the smells and the taste, all of those, the lyrics, the language, the clothing, all of that just starts coming together into my head, and I have to write it down, text it in, type it in, and I start creating a theme, and then I have to get to a way to bring it to a crescendo. So it's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. and it has to make sense. It has to be educational. In the way when I write it, I wanted to make it educational, but I also want to make it entertaining. I want to make it so the kids will have a smile on their face when they read it, and then they're excited about it because they see themselves reflected in some kind of way in the story or some way kind of way in the characters. And so then I just start putting it down, and I start getting the characters in. Once I start getting the theme and the plot of the story, and then it starts coming together. Sometimes it's organic, and I don't necessarily even know what's going to happen in the next chapter. And sometimes I have it outlined, I have it structured, and then I put it all together, and then it's one rewrite after the next because I want to get it done, I want to get it right, and I want to get the character sounds and the feel so people will say, I can see what you're writing. And that's often what I hear is that, man, your book should be a movie.
Do you hear the dialogue that you're creating? How does it come to you? How does the actual the words that your characters are speaking? How do you get that?
It's no magical it's no magical structure, but just being in the African American experience
Mhm.
and in the world experience, I hear different phrases.
Mhm.
I come across people's different way of dialects, different way they talk, different concepts they're trying to communicate, and I say I'm gonna use that. I
Mhm.
don't know where
Mhm.
I'm gonna use it, but I'm gonna use that in some kind of way and try to keep up with the times. You know, some of the old slang goes out, and some of the new slang you may not necessarily be familiar with, but you have to kind of stay abreast of what's going on currently. Or if I'm writing something from the past, I need to be talk to people who grew up in that era too, um, and if they're still alive. Um, so yeah, that's what I do. The process is my experience.
The other book that we've mentioned here, tell about that one as well.
Old Jim Crow's
Jubilee Day Caper.
Jubilee Day Caper.
Oh, yes.
There it is. And so I got the idea. What happened was the Planning People Growing Justice in Minnesota said we want to have a writing contest for a social justice award for children to learn about Juneteenth. And so they said it needs to be in a picture book form. So it has to be for children who are early readers or not able to read yet. And I had never written a picture book before. And that has a whole different flow. And the illustrations speak more than the words do. And so I had to make sure that it was concise enough to balance out so that the illustrator can have a lot of creative communication that goes on in it.
Mhm.
But this also was something that I likened to something that everybody's familiar with as well, and it's called The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. You heard of that one?
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
Yes, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Mhm.
And in old Jim Crow's Jubilee Day Caper, I wanted to make sure that Jim Crow was part of this story. And so Jim Crow, just like the Grinch who stole Christmas, is the Grinch who wants to steal Jubilee Day, which is originally called Juneteenth was originally called Jubilee Day, and right after Reconstruction. And so I wanted to have a way to stand out in this contest, this social justice writing contest, so that I could talk about Jubilee Day and Jim Crow at the same time. And so when I was writing it, I was talking to a friend of mine. I said, I'm writing a book about Juneteenth. And they said, James, how are you going to write a children's book, a preschool, never been to school children's book, and talk about Jim Crow? Isn't that a bit harrowing? And I said, man, I'm going to put Jim Crow on a cloud. Okay. And I'm going to have him up higher than everybody else and looking down at all of the colored people and controlling their lives. And in the book, Jim Crow was so angry about the slaves who had been emancipated, and they were always celebrating Jubilee Day. And then one day he says, I'm going to stop this. I am determined to stop this. And there will be no more Jubilee Day. Now let's see what the colored people will do now.
I was waiting for the answer to the question. That's great. Well, got to read the book, right? Get the book. So, other books you have, other books in the works right now?
Yes, I have 2 books coming out in the next month. Actually 3 books.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I've written my first young adult novelette, and it has 2 different styles. The first book is called The Supreme Hogan, and the second book is called The Supreme Hogan with a comic book ending. For those comic book enthusiasts who like to read by reading comics, I wrote that at the end as well. And the other book is going to be an anthology, a collection of short stories, and that's going to be for adults, and that's Black science fiction and fantasy.
So, tell me about your background, how you've come to writing, and how you've come to writing in the fiction genre in particular, and the sci-fi genre in particular. What's your background? Where'd you start?
Yeah, well, I've kind of been a late bloomer, Al. I kind of started this late in terms of putting it on paper. And so what for me, growing up in the 60s and I was enamored with cartoons, comic books, superheroes, Saturday morning cartoons, Star Trek, Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, some of those old shows that were just had my head going. And I was like, oh, I love this stuff. I just wish I could see Black people in these movies and stories that I so much love. And then I started maybe in the 90s. Someone told me that, James, you tell a good story. You write a good story, because I was writing something, and she was so excited about my writing. I was like, yeah, you stop it. I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, no. She really encouraged me to do that, to sit down and start writing. And I started writing. And I just said, I don't know. I'll just see what happens, and come up with some short little story and see what happens. And of course, it was about science fiction. It was about fantasy, and it was for adults. But I got to working on children's books when I wrote the first Jamal and Me, and it was about a Jamal and his brother Jordan, who were in Strive published that story for me. They were taken out of their home to an emergency shelter due to no fault of their own, because their parents' misdoings, and it was all about them trying to find a way to get back to their aunt who was raising them, to be able to get with them and turn around and become somebody, even though they experienced being ripped from their home and having to go through this whole process. And I figured a whole lot of kids have been dealt with that, and I dealt with that as a worker myself, so I've seen it firsthand.
I'm excited that you are writing in the futurism space, and I agree with you. I'm a Trekkie, as they call it. I'm totally fascinated by the idea of futuristic realities, and how the future will unfold, and how can it unfold, and how we can make it unfold. What is our role, and what is our power to imagine a different outcome? And the question becomes, if we accept only what we've been presented, the story, WD says this all the time, of the hunter is one that always portrays us as the victimized lion. Hunter wins. And unless we take up the pen ourselves and begin to write our own stories and to describe what happened, number one, with our truth out of our experience, and unless we then, based on that, look into our mind for the future, our imaginations, and begin to craft stories, new scenarios, new narratives, narratives in which we win, it won't happen. And so I applaud you and say that it's so critical that what we're doing continues, because we have to tell our own story and tell a different story from what we've heard so far. And so, are you conscious of the mission, the vision of creating an alternative reality for our people?
Absolutely. And the beauty of fantasy stories is that you can make it fantastic. And you can time travel, and you can float on a cloud, and you can fly to the moon, and you can disappear and reappear, and you can move objects by just thinking. You can do all kind of creative things. And the key part that I'm really um, I want to make sure that people understand is that when you see the future, you want to be able to see yourself in the future. And
Mhm,
so if you're talking about futurism or Afrofuturism, we call it,
mhm.
it's always important to see us there and not be non-existent. And that was important for me when I saw Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek,
Mhm.
and she was sitting there in all of her glory, and it just made me think that I can be just like her. She was a woman, but she was African American.
Well, so let me ask you to put your dream hat on and sort of either make up or tell a story about the future. What will the world be? This is 2023. If you don't mind, describe 2123. What do you imagine will be happening with us, with those who have descended from us 100 years from now? And do you dare dream out to 22, 23, or 24, 23, or 5,023? I mean, what does your mind let you do?
And in my one of my in the collection of short stories that I got coming out, I wrote about in about 100 years from now, where it's going to be the first black family to travel to Jupiter's moon, Europa,
Hmm.
and go and be the first to go under the water ice on Europa's moon and go beneath it and find out what it's all about. And they have their own space agency, a private space agency, and they're also aquanauts as well. So they're able to go underneath the surface and into the water, and they're just scientific geniuses to do that. And so that was something that I had already been thinking about, and I put it in the short story, the collection of short stories. And if you read it, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Fantastic. It's like in the words of Toni Morrison, and you're already doing it. And she said, if there's a story you want to read and it hasn't been written yet,
That's right.
then you must be the one to write it. And that's like it inspired me as an author. And I see it has definitely inspired you as an author.
Yes, it has,
And
WD.
because I have enjoyed hearing you. I mean, just hearing you share, I feel like, okay, there's a story. You're telling a story right now, and I'm just saying, oh, tell me more, tell me more. And speaking of which, since readers want to know, uh, where can our readers purchase your books?
You can purchase my books on my website, jdarnelljohnson.com. So it's my name and .com at the end, jdarnelljohnson.com.
Awesome, awesome. Now, 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 if you want to send just a personal message to especially children, what is something that you would like to say right now to encourage them?
If you believe it, you can achieve it. If you want it, it's yours. Don't stand there on the sideline and wait for it to come to you. You have to make it happen for yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, James, we definitely appreciated your gift, as I could call you a modern day griot. And I just say, keep on sharing your stories. And as an author myself, I can relate. I can relate to that because for me, I'm currently, writing the stories I want to read, and it's going to keep on making a difference in our community. So we definitely thank you for having us on here on Conversations with Al McFarlane.
Appreciate it, WD and Al, and I look forward to seeing you all in the very near future.
Awesome. Yeah, we look forward to having you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our readers out there, I encourage you with this. I have a motto saying, believe in dreams and never give up. Because as a writer, we're never too old or too young to follow those dreams. And we will be continuing to share our stories with amazing authors here in this Black diaspora. And that being said, I thank you.